The photograph was still warm from the printer when Wren Ashford realized the man holding it had been watching her for years. She stood in the marble foyer of Marcus Callahan's San Francisco penthouse, her single suitcase at her feet, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. The city sprawled 70 stories below, the Golden Gate Bridge cutting through afternoon fog like a blade through silk. But Wren couldn't stop staring at his hands. Those hands held a photograph of her, 16 years old, laughing at her first gallery showing in Geneva, completely unaware anyone was watching. Before we dive into this tale of passion and secrets, tell us where you're watching from. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell, because at Tales That Echo, tomorrow's story might just be about you. Your room is the third door on the left. His voice was granite wrapped in velvet, cold and unbearably deep. There's a credit card in the nightstand. The PIN is the last 4 digits of your grandfather's company. Stay out of my office, my bedroom, and my way. We'll survive the year. Wren's throat tightened. 2 months ago, she'd held her grandfather's hand as the monitors flatlined. Victor Ashford, the man who'd raised her after her parents' accident, who'd sent her to the best schools in Europe, who'd loved her when the world had forgotten she existed, had extracted one final promise from the stranger now standing before her. Keep her safe, Marcus. She's all I have left. You're not even going to say hello? The words left her before she could stop them, sharp with grief she hadn't meant to show. Marcus's jaw tightened. He was devastatingly handsome, in the cruel way of men who'd clawed their way up from nothing, all sharp angles and barely contained power. His dark hair was slightly disheveled, his charcoal suit fitted like armor, his eyes the color of whiskey held up to firelight. Those eyes wouldn't meet hers. "Hello," he said flatly. "Goodbye. I have a meeting." "My grandfather talked about you constantly." She stepped closer, something reckless rising at her chest. "He said you were the son he never had. He said you had more heart than anyone he'd ever met." Now Marcus looked at her, and what she saw in his gaze made her breath catch, something hot and desperate, and immediately shuddered, locked away behind walls of iron. "Victor was a generous man," Marcus said quietly. "He saw things in people that weren't always there." "Or maybe," Wren said, "you're just very good at hiding." The words hung between them like smoke. Marcus's hand tightened on the photograph he still held, her photograph, the one she hadn't known existed until 30 seconds ago. His knuckles went white. "Your grandfather asked me to protect you," he said, his voice dropping dangerously low. "He didn't ask me to be your friend. He didn't ask me to be kind. He asked me to keep you safe for 1 year until you turn 19 and access your trust. That's what I intend to do." "Safe from what?" Wren demanded. His eyes swept over her, quick, burning, immediately controlled, and something electric crackled down her spine. "From everything," Marcus said, "including yourself." He turned and walked away, taking the photograph with him, but not before Wren saw his hand shaking. That night, alone in a guest room larger than her entire dormitory in Switzerland, Wren lay awake and wondered why a millionaire with an empire at his fingertips looked at her like she was the only thing he couldn't afford to want, and why that knowledge made her feel like she was finally, terrifyingly, home.
3 days of silence. 3 days of Marcus leaving before dawn and returning after midnight. 3 days of meals left in the refrigerator with handwritten instructions, microwave 2 minutes, don't burn down my kitchen, that felt more like warnings than care. 3 days of Wren wandering through a penthouse that felt like a museum, beautiful and cold and utterly devoid of life. On the 4th night, she found him. The clock read 2:47 a.m. Wren had given up on sleep hours ago, her grief sitting on her chest like a stone. She'd padded barefoot to the kitchen for water and frozen in the hallway when she heard it, the clink of glass, the slow exhale of someone trying to breathe through pain. He stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, whiskey in hand, his dress shirt untucked and half unbuttoned. The city lights painted him in shades of gold and shadow. He looked exhausted, broken, beautiful. "You should be asleep." His voice cut through the darkness without him turning around. Of course he'd heard her. Men like Marcus Callahan heard everything. "So should you," Wren said, stepping into the living room despite every instinct screaming to retreat. "I don't sleep." He took a drink, and she watched his throat work. "Not well. Not for years." "Since when?" Now he turned. His eyes were dark, hollow, haunted by something she couldn't name. The top of his shirt gaped open, revealing the edge of a scar that curved across his collarbone. "Since I stopped deserving to," he said. Wren moved closer before she could stop herself. She was wearing an oversized Stanford t-shirt she'd bought at the airport and sleep shorts that suddenly felt too thin. His gaze dropped, just for a second, just a flicker, and she felt it everywhere. "My grandfather said you saved his company," she said softly. "Said you turned his failing dream into something extraordinary." "Victor saved me." Marcus's voice cracked on the words. "He found me sleeping under the Bay Bridge when I was 16, gave me education, purpose, a reason to exist. Everything I have," he gestured at the penthouse, the view, the empire. "It's his. It was always his." "And now?" Wren whispered. "Now he's gone." Marcus finished the whiskey, set down the glass too hard. "And all he asked was that I take care of you. One simple thing. 1 year." "Is it simple?" The question escaped before she could catch it. The air between them thickened. Marcus stared at her, and something in his expression shifted, control cracking, hunger bleeding through. "No," he said roughly. "It's the hardest thing I've ever done." "Why?" He crossed to her in 3 strides, and suddenly he was there, so close she could smell whiskey and cedar and something darker, something dangerous. His hand rose, trembling, and almost touched her cheek. Almost. At the last second, he pulled back like she'd burned him. "Go to bed, Wren." His voice was wrecked, barely recognizable. "Please, I'm begging you. Bo." She went, but at her bedroom door she paused, looked back. Marcus stood exactly where she'd left him, hands clenched at his sides, staring after her with the expression of a man watching his own destruction approach and unable, unwilling to stop it. Have you ever wanted something so badly you had to destroy yourself just to stay away?
Wren found the photographs on day 6. She hadn't meant to snoop. The box had been sitting on a shelf in the living room, half hidden behind art books, and she'd only wanted something to read. But when the lid came off, her heart stopped. Her. Dozens of photographs of her. Her at 16, winning the Junior Photography Award in Zurich. Her at 17, presenting her exhibition on urban decay. Her graduation from boarding school, cap slightly askew, laughing at something off camera. Candid shots Victor must have sent, her reading in cafes, walking through autumn markets, staring at paintings in museums she'd thought she was visiting alone. Years. He'd been collecting her for years. "Put those back." Wren spun. Marcus stood in the doorway, still in his suit from whatever meeting had finally dragged him home before midnight. His face was unreadable, but his eyes, God, his eyes were terrified. "Why do you have these?" Her voice shook. "Victor sent them." Each word was pulled from him like teeth. "He was proud of you. He wanted to share. You kept them." Wren held up the photograph from Geneva, the same one he'd been holding when she arrived. "This isn't just keeping in touch. This is—" "Don't." Marcus stepped forward, and something desperate cracked through his composure. "Whatever you're thinking, don't." "Were you watching me?" she demanded. "All those years while I was in Europe, while I had no idea you even existed beyond a name my grandfather mentioned, were you watching me?" The silence was its own confession. Wren's hands trembled. She should have felt violated, creeped out, afraid. Instead, she felt seen.
for the first time in her life completely and utterly seen. "Photograph me," she said. Marcus went absolutely still. "What?" "You've been looking at pictures of me for years." Ren set down the box, lifted her chin. "But you've never actually seen me, not really. So photograph me, right now. Show me what you see when you look at me." "That's not... I don't... The terrace," she said, already moving toward the doors that led to his private rooftop. "The light's perfect right now. Come on." She didn't wait for permission, didn't look back to see if he followed, but she heard his footsteps behind her, slow and reluctant and inevitable. The terrace was stunning, all weathered wood and climbing jasmine, with the Golden Gate emerging from fog in the distance. Late afternoon light turned everything amber and honey gold. Ren stopped at the railing, faced the view, heard Marcus stop somewhere behind her. "I don't have a camera," he said roughly. "Use your phone." A pause, then a soft click of a shutter. "Turn around," he said, and his voice had dropped into something low and commanding that made her stomach flip. She turned. His phone was raised, but his eyes were the real camera, drinking her in like he'd been dying of thirst. "You're beautiful," he said, and it sounded like a curse. "You know that, don't you? You've always been," click, "the most beautiful thing I've ever," click, "been afraid of." Ren moved toward him, drawn like a tide to the moon. "Are you afraid of me?" Terrified. He lowered the phone, and his hand was shaking again. "You're 18. You're Victor's granddaughter. You're everything I'm supposed to protect, and instead I'm... What?" He was so close now, close enough to touch, close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his whiskey eyes, the faint scar on his lip, the way his pulse hammered visibly in his throat. "Obsessed," Marcus whispered, "since the moment I saw your photograph 2 years ago, before I ever met you, before I had any right. Obsessed." Ren's breath caught. "Marcus!" "Don't." Marcus stepped back, pain twisting his features. "Don't say my name like that, not when I can't, when we can't." But something in her had already decided. "What if I want you to be?" she asked quietly. "Obsessed, I mean. What if I've been dreaming about you since my grandfather first showed me his picture when I was 16 and said, 'This is the man who's going to change the world'?" Marcus made a sound like she'd stabbed him. "What if," Ren continued, stepping forward as he stepped back, "what if we've both been waiting for something we were never supposed to have?" He hit the terrace railing, nowhere left to run. And still he didn't touch her. "I made a promise," he said brokenly, "to the only man who ever believed in me, to keep you safe." Ren reached up, let her fingers hover a breath away from his jaw. "Maybe," she whispered, "I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." His control shattered. For one blazing second, his hand caught her wrist, pulled her close, and she felt every hard line of his body pressed against her. Then he released her like she was fire and walked away without a word. But Ren had seen his eyes, had felt his heartbeat slamming against her chest. "This isn't over," she thought, staring after him. "This is just beginning."
1 week after the terrace, Marcus announced they were attending a gallery opening. "Victor was a patron," he said, not looking up from his laptop. "His absence will be noted. You should be there to represent the family." Ren stared at him across the kitchen island. They'd barely spoken since he'd walked away from her on the terrace. Meals left in the refrigerator, doors closing just as she opened hers. A careful, devastating dance of avoidance. "And you?" she asked. "I'll be there." His jaw tightened. "For Victor." For Victor. Of course, everything was for Victor, never for her. The gallery was in the Mission District, all exposed brick and soaring ceilings filled with San Francisco's elite, draped in black and holding champagne like weapons. Ren wore a silk dress the color of midnight that she'd found in her closet, purchased by Marcus, she assumed, though he'd never mentioned it. When she'd emerged from her room, he'd frozen mid-step. His eyes had traveled down her body slowly, hungrily before snapping away. "You look appropriate," he'd said flatly. Appropriate. She wanted to scream.
Now she wandered the gallery alone while Marcus worked the room, shaking hands with investors and collectors who wanted pieces of Victor's legacy. She studied photographs of urban decay, her specialty, though no one here knew that, and tried to pretend she wasn't tracking his every movement in her peripheral vision. "You're looking at that piece like you understand it." Wren turned. The man beside her was perhaps 25, with warm brown skin, an easy smile, and eyes that crinkled at the corners. He wore his suit like someone comfortable in his own skin. "Reed Holloway," he said, extending his hand. "I curated this exhibition." "Wren Ashford." Recognition flickered across his face. "Victor's granddaughter. I was so sorry to hear about his passing. He was one of our most generous supporters." "Thank you," Wren said, and meant it. They talked. Reed was charming and knowledgeable, asking about her own photography without condescension, genuinely interested when she described her thesis project on architectural abandonment. He laughed easily. He stood at a respectful distance. He was exactly the kind of man she should want. She felt nothing. But when she glanced across the room and found Marcus watching them, his champagne glass frozen halfway to his lips, his expression carved from stone, she felt everything. "Would you like to see the private collection?" Reed asked. "There's a series in the back that I think you'd appreciate." Before Wren could answer, Marcus materialized beside her. "We're leaving." His hand closed around her elbow, not hard, but possessive, claiming. Reed's eyebrows rose. "I don't believe we've met. Reed Holloway." Marcus Callahan. The name landed like a threat. Wren's guardian. Guardian, the word sliced through her. "I wasn't aware she needed guarding," Reed said mildly. "Now you are." Marcus's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Wren, the car is waiting." He steered her toward the exit without waiting for a response. Wren's cheeks burned, with embarrassment, with fury, with something else she refused to name. In the car, silence stretched between them like a wire about to snap. "That was humiliating," she finally said. "That was necessary. He was being friendly. He was looking at you like—" Marcus stopped. His hands gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles went white. "Like what?" Wren pressed. The city lights painted shadows across his face. He looked tortured, unraveling. "Like he had the right to," Marcus said quietly. "Is jealousy proof of love or the first sign of control? Comment what you believe."
The fight started before they reached the penthouse door. "You don't get to do that," Wen said, her voice shaking with fury as they stepped into the elevator. "You don't get to ignore me for a week and then drag me away from a conversation like I'm property." He wanted more than conversation. "So what if he did?" She spun to face him as the elevator climbed. "You've made it very clear what I am to you. An obligation, a promise to a dead man. So why do you care who talks to me?" The elevator doors opened. Marcus strode into the penthouse, shedding his jacket like armor he could no longer bear. "I don't care." Liar. Wen followed him, refusing to let him escape again. "You looked at him like you wanted to kill him." He looked at him like... Marcus whirled to face her, and something cracked open in his expression. "Like he was touching something that belongs to me." The words hit her like lightning. "I don't belong to you," Wen whispered, but her voice betrayed her, trembling with want. "I know that." He ran a hand through his hair, pacing like a caged animal. "God, I know that. You're 18, you're Victor's granddaughter, you're supposed to be off limits, and instead what? Instead, I've been in love with you since you were 16 years old." The confession tore out of him, raw and bleeding. "Since Victor showed me a photograph of your first gallery speech, you were standing at the podium, laughing at something off camera, and I thought, there she is, the one I've been waiting for. Before I knew you, before I had any right, I loved you, Wen. I've loved you for 2 years, and every day you've lived under my roof has been torture." Wen couldn't breathe. "You were 16.
he continued, his voice breaking. A child, Victor's granddaughter, and I felt things I had no business feeling, so I buried it, told myself it would pass, avoided every holiday dinner, every visit, built walls so high I couldn't even see over them anymore. And then Victor died, and you walked through my door, and... He stopped. His chest heaved. And I realized I hadn't built walls at all, he said. I'd built a cage, and you were always going to be the one to open it. Silence filled the penthouse like floodwater. If stories like this echo something you've hidden inside yourself, you're exactly where you belong. Don't miss what happens next. Marcus, Wen breathed. Don't. He stepped back, his expression shattering. Don't say anything. I shouldn't have told you. I shouldn't never have. I love you too. He went completely still. Since I was 16, she continued, stepping towards him, since my grandfather showed me your photograph and told me you were the most brilliant person he'd ever met. I used to imagine meeting you, used to dream about... Stop. His voice was wrecked. Please, if you keep talking, I won't be able to... What? She was close now, so close she could see his pulse hammering in his throat. What won't you be able to do? Stay away from you. Then don't.
He left that night. Ren woke to an empty penthouse and a text message that read, I need distance to think. I'll be at the corporate apartment. This was wrong. I'm sorry. 3 words destroyed her. This was wrong. For 8 days, she existed in a fog. She attended her virtual classes without absorbing a word. She wandered the penthouse that had started to feel like home and now felt like a mausoleum. She stared at her phone, willing him to reach out, terrified that he would. On day 3, Reed Holloway texted, I hope I didn't cause any trouble. Coffee sometime? She didn't respond. On day 5, she found the photograph box again, sat on the living room floor surrounded by images of herself, laughing, studying, existing, all captured without her knowledge, all kept by a man who claimed to love her, who'd run the moment she loved him back. On day 6, she started packing. If she was just an obligation, if her love was something shameful to escape, then she'd make it easy for him. She had money from Victor's emergency fund. She could find an apartment. She didn't need a guardian who looked at her like salvation and treated her like sin. But that night, staring at her half-filled suitcase, she couldn't finish, because leaving felt like admitting defeat. And Ren Ashford had survived losing her parents, had survived boarding schools where no one understood her grief, had survived burying the only family she had left. She could survive this, too. On day 8, she was standing at floor-to-ceiling windows at 2 a.m., their spot, the city lights bleeding through the glass, when she heard the penthouse door open. Footsteps, slow, hesitant. And then his voice, rough with exhaustion. You're still here. She didn't turn around. Where else would I go? I thought... He stopped. I thought you'd leave. I thought about it. She finally looked at him. He stood in the doorway, rumpled and unshaven, looking like he hadn't slept in days. But I'm tired of running from things that scare me. Maybe you should try it sometime. He flinched, but he didn't leave. And when he crossed the room and sank down beside her on the floor by the windows, close to touch, careful not to, Ren let herself hope. I don't know how to do this, he said quietly. I don't know how to love you without betraying Victor, without hating myself. Maybe, she said, you don't have to figure it out alone. The fog rolled through the city below them, soft and silent and infinite. And for the first time in 8 days, neither of them ran.
The fog came in like a living thing. Ran watched it swallow the Golden Gate, erasing the bridge span by span until only the tower tips remained, glowing amber through the white. Beside her, Marcus sat with his back against the floor-to-ceiling windows, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. Neither of them had moved in an hour. I don't know how to be gentle,
he said, finally, his voice rough from silence. I grew up sleeping under bridges, fighting for food, learning that softness was a weakness that got you killed. Ren turned her head, studied his profile in the city light. You've been gentle with me. I've been careful with you. His jaw tightened. There's a difference. Careful is calculated. Gentle is... He trailed off, shaking his head. Is what? Trusting someone enough to be vulnerable. He met her eyes, and the rawness there stole her breath. I don't know if I'm capable of that, Ren. I don't know if there's enough left in me that isn't broken. She shifted closer, drawn by something stronger than reason. Maybe I don't need you unbroken. Maybe I just need you honest. His hand found hers in the darkness, their fingers interlaced slowly, carefully, like they were learning a new language. I'm terrified, he admitted, of wanting you this much, of what happens when Victor's lawyer finds out, of destroying the only good thing that's happened to me in years. Then we'll be terrified together. He turned to face her fully, and in his eyes she saw the war he'd been fighting, duty against desire, honor against hunger. She watched him lose. Ren. Her name left his lips like a prayer and a curse. If I kiss you right now, I won't be able to stop. I won't be able to go back to pretending you're just an obligation. You'll be mine. Do you understand what that means? Her heart slammed against her ribs. Yes. Say it. His hand rose to cup her face, his thumb tracing her cheekbone with a tenderness that made her ache. Tell me you want this. Tell me you choose this, because I need to hear you say, I choose you. The words rushed out, fierce and certain. I've been choosing you since I was 16 years old and didn't even know your voice. I choose you, Marcus. I choose us. Something in him shattered. He kissed her like a man drowning, like she was the only air left in the world. His mouth claimed hers with a desperation that made her gasp, her hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer, closer. He tasted like whiskey and want, and 2 years of denied longing finally breaking free. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. Come with me, he said roughly. There's something I need to show you. He stood, pulled her to her feet, and led her down the hallway toward the one door she'd never been allowed to open, his bedroom. But there was one thing Ren didn't know yet, one secret Marcus had kept locked in his bedroom for 2 years.
The room was dark, except for the city glow bleeding through the windows. Ren stepped inside, her pulse thundering, and froze when she saw it. On his nightstand, framed in silver, was a photograph of her. Not one from the box in the living room, this one she'd never seen. Her at 17, standing in a Swiss snowfall, face tilted toward the sky, laughing at something she couldn't remember. Victor sent it 2 months before he died, Marcus said quietly behind her. I've looked at it every night since. Her throat tightened. Every night? Every night I couldn't sleep. He moved closer, and she felt the heat of him at her back. Every night I told myself wanting you was wrong. Every night I failed to stop. She turned to face him. In the dim light, his features were all shadow and sharp angles, beautiful and tortured. Her hands found his chest, felt his heart slamming beneath her palms. I've never done this before, she whispered. He went still. What? Any of it. Her cheeks burned, but she forced herself to hold his gaze. I'm a virgin, Marcus. I was waiting for something that mattered, for someone who... He kissed her before she could finish, soft and reverent and completely different from the desperate claiming in the hallway. I haven't either, he breathed against her mouth. What?
I tried. His hands trembled as they slid down her sides. Twice, years ago, but it felt wrong every time, like I was betraying someone I hadn't met yet. He laughed brokenly. I thought I was damaged. Turns out I was just waiting. For you. They'd both been waiting without knowing why. Has anyone ever made you realize you were waiting for them all along? Then we learned together, Ren said, pulling him toward the bed. It's my first time. Please be gentle. A fierce and tender blaze in his eyes. Always. With you. Always. What followed was clumsy and sweet and devastating. They fumbled with buttons, laughed when they bumped noses, gasped when skin met skin for the first time. Marcus mapped her body like she was sacred territory, every kiss a question, every touch an answer. When they finally joined, Ren cried out from the stretch, from the intensity, from the overwhelming rightness of him inside her. He stilled immediately, his forehead pressed to hers, his breath ragged. Are you okay? Should I stop? Don't you dare! Ren wrapped herself around him, pulled him deeper. Don't you dare stop! He didn't. Afterwards, tangled in his sheets, his hand tracing lazy patterns on her spine, Ren felt something she hadn't experienced since her grandfather died. Home. I love you, Marcus murmured into her hair. I've loved you for 2 years. I love you for the rest of my life. She tilted her face up, kissed the corner of his mouth. Then we figure the rest together. They fell asleep wrapped in each other, the fog still blanketing the city, the world outside forgotten. They didn't know that by morning, everything would shatter.
The knock came at 7 a.m. Ren woke to Marcus already pulling on pants, his expression tight with something she couldn't read. Before she could speak, he pressed a finger to his lips and pointed toward the bathroom. She went, heart hammering, wrapping his robe around her body. Through the door, she heard voices. You didn't answer your phone for 8 days. A woman's voice, sharp and clipped. Victor's estate requires attention, Marcus. You can't simply disappear because you're having some kind of breakdown. I'm not having a breakdown, Eleanor. No. The woman, Eleanor, laughed coldly. Then explain why Victor's 18-year-old granddaughter's suitcase is still in the guest room, and yet this bedroom smells distinctly like careful. The single word carried enough threat to make Ren's blood freeze. Silence stretched. Then Eleanor spoke again, softer but no less dangerous. I've known you since Victor pulled you off the streets. I've watched you build an empire on his legacy, and now you're telling me you've seduced his granddaughter, a child? She's 18, she's an adult, and I didn't seduce her. The law may call her an adult, the board won't. Eleanor's heels clicked against the hardwood. Victor left you controlling interest in his company, contingent on one condition, that you protect Ren's inheritance. If the board discovers you've compromised her, compromised yourself, they'll vote no confidence. Everything Victor built, everything you built, gone. Ren's hand flew to her mouth. You have 2 choices, Eleanor continued. End this now, put her on a plane back to Switzerland, and we never speak of it again. Or pursue this ridiculous affair and lose everything your mentor died believing you deserved. The silence that followed was unbearable. Give me a week, Marcus said finally. His voice was hollow. 1 week to figure this out. You have 3 days. The click of heels retreating, the sound of the penthouse door closing, and then nothing. Ren emerged from the bathroom to find Marcus standing at the window, his back to her, his shoulders rigid with tension. You heard, he said. It wasn't a question. Yes, she's right. He still wouldn't look at her. Victor trusted me, the board trusted me, and You've loved me. Ren crossed to him, forced him to turn, to see her. You've loved me, Marcus. That's not a crime. That's not a betrayal. It will cost us everything. Then we lose everything together. Her voice didn't waver. I'm not getting on a plane. I'm not running.
And if you try to send me away, I'll fight you every step of the way." Something cracked in his expression, fear giving way to something fiercer. "You're impossible," he said roughly. "I learned from you." He pulled her into his arms and held on like she was the only solid thing in a crumbling world. 3 days. They had 3 days to find a way through, or lose each other forever.
On the third day, the letter arrived. It came through Eleanor herself, though her expression suggested she'd rather swallow glass. She stood in the penthouse foyer, a sealed envelope in her hand, her jaw tight with something Wren couldn't name. "Victor's safety deposit box," Eleanor said flatly. "His instructions were clear. Deliver this to you both if circumstances ever suggested you'd become involved." Marcus went still beside Wren. "He knew?" "Apparently." Eleanor thrust the envelope toward him. "I'd suggest you read it before the board meeting tomorrow. Whatever's inside may be the only thing that saves you." She left without another word. Marcus stared at the envelope, heavy cream paper, Victor's handwriting on the front. From Marcus and Wren. "When the time comes." "Open it," Wren whispered. His hands trembled as he broke the seal. "My dear boy, if you're reading this, then you finally stopped fighting what I've seen coming for 2 years. Did you really think I didn't notice? The way you asked about Wren every time we spoke, the way you kept every photograph I sent, the way you found excuses to avoid family gatherings, not because you didn't care, but because you cared too much. I'm dying as I write this. The doctors gave me months, though I suspect it will be weeks. And my only regret is that I won't be there to see you realize what I've known since I first showed you her photograph. You were made for each other." She is 18 now, a woman, not a child, brilliant and stubborn and brave, just like her grandmother was. And you, Marcus, are the only man I trust to love her the way she deserves. Not because you owe me, not because I asked, but because your heart recognized hers before your mind could catch up. I've amended my will. Eleanor has the documents. My controlling interest passes to you both, jointly, on the condition that you marry within the year. Not as a punishment, but as a gift. Build something together. Build a family. Build the life I never got to have after losing my wife too soon. Take care of each other. That's all I've ever wanted. With all my love, Victor. Wren's vision blurred with tears. Beside her, Marcus made a sound like something breaking and healing at the same time. "He knew," Marcus breathed. "He planned this. He gave us his blessing." Wren touched the letter, traced her grandfather's handwriting. "Before he even died, he gave us permission to love each other." Marcus pulled her into his arms, buried his face in her hair, and she felt his tears hot against her neck. "I spent 2 years hating myself," Marcus said brokenly, "thinking I was betraying him, and the whole time he was waiting for us to figure it out." "That sounds like him," Wren laughed through her tears. "Always 3 steps ahead." The board meeting the next day was brief. Eleanor presented the amended will. The board had no grounds to object. And when Marcus and Wren walked out of that conference room, hands intertwined, they walked into a future Victor had designed for them from the start. 6 months later, they married on the terrace where Marcus had first photographed her, where she'd first seen him see her. The fog rolled in as they exchanged vows, soft and silver, wrapping them in privacy as the city disappeared below. "I'm still terrified," Marcus admitted, pressing his forehead to hers after the officiant pronounced them married. "Good," Wren said. "That means it matters." He kissed her then, slow and deep and full of promise, and she tasted forever on his lips. Some love stories begin with a spark. Theirs began with a photograph, a promise, and 2 people brave enough to choose each other when everything said they shouldn't. Can love arranged by the dead ever truly belong to the living? Or was it always written in their bones?